The stars looked cold and distant from the viewport of the UES Dauntless. Captain John Miller stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his blue uniform neat, despite the 18-hour shift he had just completed. The ship hummed around him, a sound that had become more comforting than his own heartbeat over the years. "Captain, we're approaching the rendezvous point," said Officer Peter Hayes from the navigation console. John nodded. "Any sign of voidborne activity in the sector?" "Nothing yet, sir, but you know how they are. They appear when least expected." That was the problem with the entire war. The Voidborn were always one step ahead, their strategies perfect, their technology superior. For 300 years, the Galactic Coalition had been losing ground, system by system. The alliance of 27 spacefaring species, including humanity, stood on the brink of total defeat. Lieutenant Kate Powell entered the bridge, her red hair pulled back in a tight bun. As the head of the Dauntless's Marine contingent, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much combat. "Marines are ready, Captain. Though I still think this diplomatic mission is a waste of time." John turned to face her. "The Coalition needs allies, Lieutenant. Every projection shows we'll be defeated within 15 years unless something changes." Kate crossed her arms. "Allies won't help if we keep fighting the Voidborn their way. We need to change how we fight, not just add more ships to lose." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. The tactical officer, Sam Davis, called out, "Sir, 3 Voidborn cruisers decloaking at Mark 7. "An ambush," John said, his voice steady despite the danger. "Red alert. Battle stations." The bridge erupted into activity as crew members rushed to their positions. The standard Coalition protocol in this situation was clear: retreat, avoid engagement, preserve forces for battles that could be won. The Dauntless was a diplomatic vessel, not designed for combat against multiple Voidborn cruisers. "Preparing jump coordinates for emergency retreat," called Officer Hayes. John watched the enemy ships on the main display. Something about their formation struck him as odd. They were positioned perfectly to cut off standard escape routes, but they had left a small gap in their coverage. "Belay that order," John said. Kate looked at him with surprise. "Sir, they expect us to run. Everyone always runs." John pointed to the display. "That's not just a tactical formation. It's a psychological one. They know exactly how Coalition ships respond to ambush." He turned to his weapons officer. "Load all forward torpedo tubes. Helm, plot a direct course toward the Lid Voidborn ship." The bridge fell silent. Sam Davis spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Captain, Coalition protocol specifically forbids direct engagement when outnumbered." "I'm aware of the protocol, Officer Davis. But the Voidborn know that protocol too. They're counting on it." John's voice hardened. "Lieutenant Powell, prepare your Marines for possible boarding action." Kate's eyes widened for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "Yes, sir." The Dauntless surged forward, accelerating toward the enemy rather than away. On the Voidborn ships, there was a noticeable delay in response, the first time anyone on the bridge had ever seen the enemy hesitate. "Fire all forward torpedoes on my mark," John ordered. "Then hard to starboard. Their tracking systems will need 2.3 seconds to recalibrate if we change course immediately after firing." Sam looked up from his console. "Sir, how could you know their exact response time?" "Because I studied their patterns instead of just our own protocols," John replied. "Mark." The Dauntless shuddered as torpedoes launched toward the Lid Voidborn cruiser. The ship then banked sharply, throwing crew members against their restraints. The torpedoes struck their target just as John had predicted, and the enemy vessel's shields flickered and failed. "They're breaking formation," Kate said, watching the tactical display with growing excitement. They didn't expect this. For the first time in the war, a coalition ship had surprised the Voidborn. And as the Dauntless continued its unorthodox attack pattern, something became clear to everyone on the bridge. The enemy might be stronger, but they weren't unbeatable. They just needed to be fought in a way they couldn't predict. News of the Dauntless's victory spread quickly through coalition channels. One small ship had done what entire fleets could not: successfully engage Voidborn forces and win. The recording of the battle played on screens across Coalition Command on Centauri Station. Admiral Susan Clark watched the footage for the 12th time, her eyes fixed on Captain Miller's tactics. As the highest-ranking human in the Coalition forces, she had fought for years to prove humanity's worth to the Alliance. "Play it again," she told her aide. "Focus on the moment they changed course after firing." The alien leaders of the Coalition had gathered around the large display. General Zux, a tall being with gray skin and 4 arms, shook his head. "This was luck, nothing more," he said. "One victory does not change our strategy." Susan turned to face the gathered officials. "With respect, General, this wasn't luck. This was the human element." She walked to the center of the room. "For 300 years, you've fought this war using perfect logic, careful planning, and strict protocols. And for 300 years, you've been losing." Susan pointed to the screen where the Dauntless executed its unexpected maneuver. "Humans don't think like the rest of the Coalition species. We're messy, unpredictable, sometimes irrational. Against most enemies, that would be a weakness. But against the Voidborn, it's our greatest strength." The room fell silent as the alien leaders considered her words. Admiral Tellus, an old veteran with scaled skin, spoke up. "What are you suggesting, Admiral Clark?" "A new approach. Special combat units led by humans. Let us fight the way we fight best." Meanwhile, on the military deck of Centauri Station, Lieutenant Kate Powell watched as aliens from 6 different species attempted to learn human combat techniques. The training room was filled with the sounds of effort and occasional frustration. "No, Officer Rell, don't telegraph your move," Kate said to a blue-skinned warrior twice her size. "The point isn't to follow the perfect form. It's to surprise your opponent." Officer Rell frowned. "But the manual states." "Forget the manual," Kate interrupted. "The Voidborn have studied your manuals. They know what to expect." Across the station, Dr. Alan Wright bent over his console, studying brain scans of Coalition soldiers from different species. The human neural pattern stood out clearly from the others. "Fascinating," he muttered. His alien colleague, Dr. Nen, leaned over to look. "What have you found?" she asked. Alan pointed to the display. "Look at how humans process battlefield information. See these pathways. When faced with danger, other species' brains follow logical response patterns. But humans," he'd highlighted a section of the scan, "we create new neural connections on the spot. We improvise." Dr. Nen's large eyes blinked rapidly. "Constructive irrationality. Your species embraces chaos in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow do." The next day, Admiral Clark presented her proposal to Coalition High Command. Captain Miller stood beside her, freshly promoted after the Dauntless incident. "Project Wildcard," she said, displaying her plan on the main screen. "A new military program that places humans in key combat roles throughout our fleet." General Zux scoffed. "Humans are the newest members of the Coalition, the least experienced in space warfare. That's exactly why we need them. Susan replied. "The Voidborn can predict everything we do, because we've been fighting the same way for centuries. Humans bring something you can't program into a battle computer: unpredictability." Captain Miller stepped forward. "The Voidborn's advantage has always been their ability to calculate every move we make, but they can't calculate what they don't understand." The room erupted in argument, but in the end, desperation won out over tradition. Project Wildcard was approved on a trial basis. That evening, as Kate finished her training session, she received new orders. She would lead the first elite mixed-species squad under the Wildcard Initiative. For the first time in generations, there was a feeling spreading through the coalition that few recognized at first. It took Kate a moment to identify it as she looked at her new team. Hope. Project Wildcard began with more resistance than support. Many coalition soldiers refused to take orders from humans, who were still seen as newcomers to galactic society. Captain Miller faced this problem daily as he tried to implement new tactical training. "Your kind has been in space for barely a century," said Commander Vex, a veteran with purple skin and eyes that glowed in the dim light of the tactical room. "My people have fought the Voidborn since before your ancestors discovered electricity." John didn't argue. Instead, he pointed to the battle simulator. "Then you won't mind demonstrating the proper approach to this scenario." The alien commander stepped up to the simulator with confidence. The virtual scenario showed a Voidborn patrol near an asteroid field. Commander Vex executed a textbook coalition response, carefully maneuvering to avoid detection while gathering intelligence. "Perfect by the book," John said when the simulation ended. "And that's exactly why you'd be dead in real life. The Voidborn wrote that book too." He reset the simulator and took control. Instead of the careful approach, John sent his virtual ships directly into the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while approaching from an angle the Voidborn sensors couldn't monitor. "Reckless," Commander Vex said, but his voice had less certainty now. In another part of the station, Officer Eric Bennett worked late into the night. He had been a game designer before joining the Coalition forces, and now he was rebuilding the battle simulators. His new program incorporated random elements and human unpredictability into every scenario. "The system is ready for testing," Eric told Admiral Clark the next morning. "It can generate combat situations that even I can't predict, and I built it." Susan nodded. "Good. We need to train our forces to expect the unexpected." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kate Powell faced her own challenges. Her mixed-species squad met for training in the large combat hall. Most of the alien warriors towered over her, their faces showing doubt about their human leader. "Today we're going to forget everything you know about combat formations," Kate said. "The Voidborn expect you to follow patterns. We're going to break those patterns." A large warrior with rocky skin crossed his arms. "Our formations are based on thousands of years of warfare. They are proven." Kate smiled. "And they've been failing for 300 years against the Voidborn. Time to try something new." She divided them into teams and gave each group a different approach to the same scenario. Some used standard tactics while others tried human methods. When they ran the exercise, the results spoke for themselves. The teams using unpredictable human tactics succeeded while the others failed. 2 weeks later, Project Wildcard faced its first real test. The Voidborn launched a surprise attack against the Coalition's 7th Fleet near the Orion border. Admiral Clark received the distress call during a meeting with Coalition High Command. "The 7th Fleet is requesting immediate reinforcements," the communications officer reported. "They're outnumbered 3-1. General Zux shook his head. "The 7th Fleet is lost. We should conserve our forces." Susan stood up. The wildcard units are ready for deployment. Let me send them." After a brief argument, permission was granted. Captain Miller coordinated the response from the command center, while Kate led one of the ground teams personally. Their ships used Eric's new tactical system to plot approach vectors the Voidborn wouldn't expect. Coalition veterans watched in disbelief as the human-led units executed maneuvers that defied conventional wisdom. Ships appeared from unexpected directions. Ground teams changed tactics mid-battle. Communications used shifting frequencies that confused Voidborn interceptors. The battle was brutal. Many coalition soldiers didn't return. But for the first time in decades, a Voidborn offensive was stopped completely. When Kate's team returned to base, battered but victorious, they found the previously doubtful Commander Vex waiting for them. "Your methods are strange," he admitted to Kate, "but they work." He placed his hand on his chest in a gesture of respect. "Teach us more." Project Wildcard was no longer just an experiment. It had become the Coalition's first real hope. 3 months after the victory at Orion, Project Wildcard was no longer just a small experimental program. Human officers were placed in key positions throughout the Coalition fleet. Kate Powell, now promoted to commander, stood before Admiral Clark and the Coalition War Council. "The Voidborn supply depot at Cygnus Station remains heavily defended," Kate said, pointing to the holographic map. "But I believe we can hit it using a new approach." General Zux frowned. "Every simulation shows an attack on Cygnus would result in 80% casualties. It's suicide." Kate smiled. "Only if we follow expected tactics. My team has developed a different plan." She outlined her strategy, which involved splitting her forces into multiple small groups and attacking from directions the Voidborn would consider too risky to be attempted. Several coalition leaders shook their heads in disbelief. "This defies every principle of combat we've established," one of them said. "Exactly," Kate replied. "That's why it will work." Admiral Clark studied the plan carefully. "I approve this mission. Commander Powell, you have 48 hours to prepare your teams." Elsewhere on the station, Captain Miller worked with a group of tactical officers to develop what he called Chaos Protocol. It was a battle doctrine that embraced unpredictability as its core principle. "The key is controlled chaos," John explained to his team. "We need to be unpredictable to the enemy while still coordinating with each other." A young officer raised her hand. "But how do we coordinate if our own allies don't know what we're going to do next?" John pointed to a series of coded signals on the display. "We use pattern recognition that makes sense to humans, but appears random to Voidborn analysis. We'll be speaking a language they can't understand." In the engineering section, Lisa Martinez led a team working on captured Voidborn technology. The human engineer had discovered that Voidborn weapons could be modified in ways their creators never intended. They designed everything for maximum efficiency, Lisa explained to her mixed species team. But sometimes efficiency isn't what you need. Sometimes you need a weapon that does the unexpected. She demonstrated a modified Voidborn energy rifle that now fired in unpredictable bursts instead of the regular pattern that Coalition shields had been unable to block. 2 days later, Commander Powell led her mission to Cygnus Station. They approached in small, fast ships that darted between asteroid fields and radiation belts that larger vessels avoided. The Voidborn defenses were oriented toward the main approach vectors, leaving small gaps that human pilots were willing to risk flying through. When the attack began, it came from 6 directions at once. Kate's team boarded the station, while the Voidborn were still trying to understand what was happening. They fought their way to the central computer core, downloaded critical intelligence, and planted explosives before the defenders could mount an organized response. As they escaped, Kate sent the detonation signal. The supply depot erupted in a series of explosions, destroying resources the Voidborn had spent years accumulating. When they returned to Coalition headquarters, the raid's success stunned the War Council. The intelligence they gathered revealed Voidborn fleet movements and plans that had been unknown for decades. Admiral Clark didn't waste time celebrating. Captain Miller analyzed this intelligence and integrated into Chaos Protocol. I want a full counteroffensive plan in 3 days. John nodded. Yes, Admiral. I think we can target their shipyard at Proxima. It would be the first major offensive in 50 years. For days, planning sessions ran nonstop. Lisa's team modified Coalition ships with their new hybrid technology. Eric updated the battle simulators with the latest intelligence. Kate trained more mixed-species teams in human combat techniques. When Admiral Clark presented the counteroffensive plan to Coalition High Command, there was little resistance. The success at Cygnus had changed minds. The plan was approved unanimously. As preparations began, Kate found John in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Do you think this will really work?" she asked. "A full-scale counteroffensive." John turned to her. 3 months ago, they wouldn't even let us lead a single squad. Now they're giving us a fleet. He smiled. "We've already changed everything, Kate. Now we just need to win." The battle for the Proxima shipyard was a stunning victory for the Coalition. For the first time in generations, they had taken territory back from the Voidborn. Celebrations spread through Coalition space, and Project Wildcard received full support and resources. But the Voidborn were not defeated. They were adapting. 6 weeks after the Proxima victory, Commander Kate Powell led a mission to secure a forward base near Voidborn territory. Her team included warriors from 7 different species, all trained in human combat methods. Their ship approached the small moon that would serve as their new outpost. "Something doesn't feel right," Kate said, studying the sensor readings. "It's too quiet." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared. New Voidborn ships appeared, unlike any they had seen before. They moved in patterns that seemed random, almost human in their unpredictability. "They've adapted," Kate said, her voice tight. Battle stations. The fight was brutal and short. The Voidborn had studied human tactics and created countermeasures. They deployed weapons that targeted human physiology specifically, sound frequencies that caused disorientation, gas that affected human nervous systems but left other species unharmed. Kate ordered a retreat, but it was too late. Voidborn boarding parties breached their ship. The last message sent to Coalition headquarters was Kate's voice. "They were waiting for us. Don't send." Then silence. At Coalition Command, Captain John Miller watched the recording of Kate's final transmission for the 5th time. Admiral Clark stood beside him, her face grim. "They took 12 prisoners, including Commander Powell," she said. "The rest of the team was killed." John turned to her. "We need to mount a rescue mission." Susan shook her head. "High Command has denied the request. They believe it's a trap designed to capture more humans for study." "They're right," John said. "It is a trap. That's why I need to go. You're too valuable to risk, Captain." John's eyes hardened. "Kate is the heart of Wildcard. Without her, we lose more than just one officer." He paused. "I'm going, with or without permission." Later that night, John met with a small group of loyal officers from different species. Among them was Officer Rel, the blue-skinned warrior who had once doubted Kate's methods. "Commander Powell saved my life at Proxima," Rel said. "I will help rescue her." The others nodded in agreement. They had all fought alongside humans and had seen firsthand how effective they could be. John outlined his plan. We go in small and fast. No official support. Just one ship and a volunteer crew. 3 days later, their unmarked vessel approached a hidden void-born research facility. Using tactics even newer than those Kate had developed, they managed to slip past the outer defenses. Once inside, they split into teams. John led the group heading for the detention area. What they found there chilled his blood. The Voidborn weren't just holding prisoners. They were studying them. Humans were connected to machines that monitored their brain activity as they responded to different scenarios. They're trying to understand how we think, John whispered, so they can predict us. In a heavily guarded cell, they found Kate. She was pale and thin but alive. When she saw John, her eyes widened. "You shouldn't have come," she said weakly. "It's what they wanted." "I know," John replied as he broke her restraints. "That's why we didn't do what they expected." As they freed the other prisoners, an alarm sounded. Voidborn security forces converged on their position. The rescue team fought their way back toward their ship, using corridors the Voidborn considered too dangerous for escape routes. Before they left, Kate insisted they download data from the research computers. "We need to know what they learned about us," she said. They'd barely made it back to Coalition space. Their ship was damaged, and half the rescue team was wounded, but they had succeeded where the Voidborn thought they would fail. As medics treated Kate's injuries, she showed John what they had discovered. "The Voidborn are close to understanding human unpredictability," she said. "They're developing algorithms that can anticipate even our most random choices." John studied the data with growing concern. "Then we need to become even more unpredictable." Kate shook her head. "It's worse than that. I found something else while I was captive. Something about the Voidborn themselves." She looked up at him with troubled eyes. "They're not what we thought they were." Commander Kate Powell sat in the medical bay for 3 days before doctors cleared her to speak to Coalition leadership. Captain John Miller stayed by her side, worried about the haunted look in her eyes. When she was finally ready, Admiral Clark called a private meeting with only the highest-ranking officials present. "The Voidborn are not natural," Kate said, her voice still weak. "They were created as weapons in a war that ended thousands of years ago." She shared what she had learned during her captivity. While connected to their machines, she had glimpsed information in the Voidborn systems. Their species had been engineered by an ancient civilization to be perfect soldiers, logical, precise, and deadly. They were programmed to win at all costs, Kate explained. But their creators lost the war anyway and were destroyed. With no one to turn them off, the Voidborn continued their mission. They've been conquering worlds ever since, following their original programming. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Ryan Cooper, a human intelligence officer who had been analyzing the data stolen during the rescue mission, stepped forward. "Commander Powell's discovery matches what we found in their research files," Ryan said. "The Voidborn don't just fight us. They study us, especially humans. They see us as an anomaly they can't predict." He displayed images of human brain scans taken by the Voidborn. "They've been trying to create a model that can predict human behavior, but they keep failing because true creativity can't be predicted." Dr. Alan Wright finished for him. The scientist had joined the meeting to present his latest findings. "I've been studying why human tactics work against them. It's not just that we're unpredictable. It's that we can create truly new ideas. The Voidborn can only combine existing patterns in new ways." Captain Miller stood up and walked to the center of the room. "This explains why they've been able to adapt to our tactics. They can't create, but they can learn and copy. He turned to Admiral Clark. But there's a weakness here. If they're programs running on ancient instructions, they must have limits. Lines they can't cross. Thoughts they can't think. Admiral Clark nodded slowly. A perfect logical system can't handle true paradox. Exactly, John said. Their perfect logical predictability is their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. Dr. Wright's eyes widened as he understood. Human unpredictability isn't just a tactical advantage. It's an existential threat to their entire system. For the next week, a special team worked in secret. Dr. Wright and Ryan Cooper analyzed the void-born psychology based on the captured data. Captain Miller and Commander Powell, still recovering from her captivity, developed new strategies that went beyond mere unpredictability. "We need to do more than surprise them," Kate explained to a small group of officers. "We need to break their ability to process what we do at all." They created Operation Mindstorm, a psychological warfare campaign designed by human specialists. It would deploy patterns of behavior specifically designed to cause logical contradictions in void-born tactical systems. When they presented the plan to Coalition High Command, many of the alien leaders were confused. "This isn't a battle plan," General Zuck said, studying the details. "Where are the fleet movements? The target objectives?" "This is something new," Admiral Clark explained. "We're not just fighting their ships and soldiers. We're attacking the way they think." After hours of debate, the plan was approved, but not without concerns. No one had ever attempted psychological warfare against the Voidborn. No one knew if their minds could be affected at all. As the meeting ended, Kate pulled John aside. "There's something else I learned while in captivity," she said quietly. "Something I didn't tell the others." John looked at her with concern. "What is it?" Kate glanced around to make sure no one could hear them. "The Voidborn aren't just following their programming anymore. They're evolving. And they're afraid of us, John. Truly afraid. They don't understand how we think, and it terrifies them." John considered this new information. "Then we have a chance. Fear makes even logical beings irrational." Kate nodded. "And that's our best weapon. Not our ships or guns, but our minds." Operation Mindstorm began with small actions across dozens of star systems. Coalition ships performed maneuvers that made no tactical sense. Communications contained patterns designed to confuse voidborn analysis systems. Battle plans changed mid-execution for no apparent reason. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Voidborn continued their methodical advance through Coalition space. But slowly, reports began to come in of strange behavior from Voidborn ships. They would pause during battles, as if recalculating. Some would retreat from winnable engagements. Others would fire on empty space. "It's working," Captain John Miller told Admiral Clark as they reviewed the latest reports. "Their prediction models are failing." Susan nodded, studying the data. "Time to move to Phase 2. We need to push them past confusion into actual system failure." Commander Kate Powell led the Special Forces team chosen for the most dangerous mission of the operation. Their goal was to infiltrate the Voidborn Central Command structure, not to destroy it, but to introduce a special program Dr. Wright had designed. "Remember," Kate told her team as their stealth ship approached the massive Voidborn command station, "we're not here to fight unless absolutely necessary. Our job is to plant the seed and get out." The team included humans and aliens who had all trained in the most unpredictable human tactics. They used routes through the station that Voidborn logic deemed too risky to guard properly. When they did encounter resistance, they employed combat patterns that changed randomly, making it impossible for the defenders to adapt. Meanwhile, Captain Miller coordinated the largest fleet action in Coalition history. Ships from every species moved in formations that constantly shifted. They would begin a standard attack pattern, then suddenly break into completely different movements. Weapons fired at unexpected times and targets. The Voidborn fleet responded with increasing delay. Their perfect coordination began to show cracks. Ships would start one maneuver, then switch to another, then freeze in place. In the Voidborn Central Command, Kate's team reached the main computer core. Officer Rel stood guard while she uploaded Dr. Wright's program. It wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It was something uniquely human, a paradox loop. A set of instructions that were individually logical but collectively impossible. "Upload complete," Kate whispered. "Let's move." As they retreated, alarms blared throughout the station. Not for the intruders, but for something happening in the Voidborn command system itself. Kate smiled grimly. The paradox was spreading. Back in the main battle, John watched as Voidborn ships began to move erratically. Some fired on their own allies, others simply shut down. For the first time in the centuries-long war, the Voidborn leadership was experiencing complete strategic paralysis. But victory came with a cost. As Kate's team neared their extraction point, they intercepted a Voidborn communication. The command structure, facing total collapse, had activated a final solution, a doomsday weapon targeted at the Coalition's primary worlds. "We need to stop that weapon," Kate said, changing her team's course toward the station's weapon control center. Admiral Clark received the warning from Kate's team just as the Coalition fleet was pressing its advantage. "All ships, break off attack," she ordered. "Converge on coordinates 227 Mark 35. We have a doomsday scenario." The massive Voidborn weapon began powering up, drawing energy from nearby stars. Coalition ships raced to intercept it, but their weapons couldn't penetrate its shields. "There's only one way to stop it," Admiral Clark said quietly. She ordered all personnel off her flagship, keeping only a skeleton volunteer crew. "What are you doing?" John asked over the communication channel. "The only unpredictable thing left," Susan replied. "Something they won't have a contingency for." Before anyone could stop her, Admiral Clark ordered her ship to maximum speed, aiming directly for the weapon's main power conduit. The collision caused a cascade of explosions that ripped through the massive weapon. The doomsday device imploded, taking Admiral Clark's ship with it. In the stunned silence that followed, Captain Miller received a transmission from Kate's team. They had survived and were heading home. "Admiral Clark?" Kate asked. John shook his head slowly. "She saved us all, and she gave us our chance to end this war." All around them, the Voidborn fleet was in disarray, their command structure corrupted by human unpredictability, and their final weapon destroyed by human sacrifice. For the first time, the end of the war seemed possible.